The next morning brought a flurry of phone calls that would change everything. William had barely slept, but he knew what he had to do. His first call was to his father, King Charles, who listened in stunned silence as William explained their plan. "William's son," Charles said after a long pause, "what you're suggesting has never been done before. The implications for the monarchy, for your family's privacy." "I know, father," William replied, standing at his office window and watching Kate play with their children in the garden below. "But sometimes doing the right thing means taking risks. These children don't have time for us to follow protocol." There was another long silence before Charles spoke again. "Tell me more about this hospital." For the next hour, William shared everything: the stories of the children they had met, the medical breakthroughs that had happened in that pediatric wing, the families who had found hope in the darkest moments of their lives. He told his father about Emma's drawings that covered an entire wall in the children's art therapy room, and about Marcus, who had written a letter to the Queen asking her to visit his friend who was too sick to leave his bed. "These aren't just statistics, father," William concluded. "These are real children with real families who love them. And if we don't do something, they'll have nowhere to go." Charles was quiet for a moment before responding. "Your grandmother always said that the crown's greatest power was its ability to bring out the best in people. Perhaps you're right. Perhaps this is how we do that." The conversation with the Queen was even more challenging. At 99 years old, she had seen the monarchy survive 2 world wars, multiple scandals, and dramatic social changes. But when William explained their proposal, even she seemed taken aback. "William," she said, her voice carrying the weight of decades of experience, "the royal family has maintained certain boundaries for very good reasons. Once you open that door, you can never close it again." "I understand, Your Majesty," William replied, using the formal address even though they were speaking privately. "But I also understand that sometimes the greatest leaders are the ones who are willing to change when change is needed." Kate had been listening to his side of the conversation, and when he hung up, she could see the tension in his shoulders. "What did she say?" Kate asked softly. "She wants to meet with us tomorrow morning," William replied. "Both of us. Dort. She said she needs to look us in the eyes and make sure we understand what we're asking for." That night, neither of them slept well. They lay in bed talking quietly about what their lives might look like after such a public exposure, what it would mean for their children, and whether they were making the right choice. "Are we being naive?" Kate whispered in the darkness. "Are we risking everything for something that might not even work?" William turned to face her, his hand finding hers under the covers. "Maybe," he admitted. "But I keep thinking about what my mother would have done. She broke protocol all the time when it came to helping people. She held AIDS patients when no one else would touch them. She walked through minefields to bring attention to the suffering of innocent people. She understood that sometimes being royal means being brave." Kate squeezed his hand. "She would be proud of you for even considering this." "She would be proud of us," he corrected. "This was your idea, your courage. I'm just trying to keep up." Next morning, they dressed carefully for their meeting with the Queen. Kate chose a simple navy dress, something respectful, but not overly formal. William wore a dark suit without any royal decorations. They wanted to present themselves as parents and advocates, not as distant royals requesting permission for a publicity stunt. As they walked through the corridors of Windsor Castle toward the Queen's private sitting room, Kate felt her heart racing. She had been part of the royal family for over a decade, but this felt different. This felt like the moment when they would either gain the support they needed to help those children, or lose the trust of the monarchy forever. "Whatever happens," William said softly as they approached the door, "we tried to do the right thing." Kate nodded, took a deep breath, and knocked on the door that would determine the fate of 237 children whose lives hung in the balance. The Queen's sitting room felt smaller than usual as William and Kate settled into the antique chairs across from her. Sunlight filtered through the heavy curtains, creating patterns on the Persian rug that had witnessed countless historic conversations. But today felt different. Today, the future of sick children depended on what happened in this room. "Before we discuss your proposal," the Queen began, her voice measured and careful, "I want to understand something. Catherine, this was your idea, wasn't it?" Kate felt her cheeks flush slightly, but she met the Queen's gaze directly. Yes, Your Majesty, it was. And you understand what you're asking? You're not just requesting permission to raise money, you're asking to fundamentally change how the royal family interacts with the public. You're asking to give up privacy that once lost can never be recovered. I do understand that, Kate replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. But I also understand that there are children fighting for their lives who don't have the luxury of privacy. They're in hospital rooms where every moment is exposed, where every struggle is visible to strangers. If our comfort zone is the price for their lives, then I'm willing to pay it. The Queen studied Kate's face for a long moment, then turned to William. And you agree with this assessment? William nodded firmly. Your Majesty, yesterday I received a letter from a 9-year-old girl named Sophie. She's been in the hospital for 8 months fighting brain cancer. She wrote to tell me that she draws pictures of our family because it helps her imagine what it would be like to go home to people who love her. His voice cracked slightly. Her parents both work 3 jobs to pay for treatments that insurance won't cover. When the pediatric wing closes, she'll have to travel for hours each way for care, if she can afford it at all. The Queen's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Show me this letter. William pulled out his phone and displayed the photo he had taken of Sophie's letter. The handwriting was shaky, clearly written by someone weakened by treatments, but the words were clear. Dear Prince William, I know you probably get lots of letters, but I wanted to tell you that my mummy says you and Princess Kate help children like me. I hope you never stop helping because sometimes you're the only ones who remember that we're still here. The silence in the room was profound. The Queen read the letter twice, her fingers tracing the screen as if she could somehow reach through it to comfort the child who had written those words. How many letters like this have you received? She asked quietly. Hundreds, Kate answered. Every week we get letters from children and parents who are scared, who feel forgotten by the system. The hospital isn't just a building to them. It's hope. It's the place where miracles happen, where families find strength they didn't know they had. The Queen set down the phone and walked to the window. Looking out at the gardens where she had played as a child, where she had raised her own children, where she had found solace during the darkest moments of her reign. When she turned back to face them, her expression had changed. In 1940, she said slowly, during the Blitz, my mother made a decision that horrified the government. She refused to send my sister and me to Canada for safety. She said that the children of Britain were staying in Britain, and so would the children of the king. People criticized her, said she was putting us at unnecessary risk. But she understood something that others didn't. Sometimes being royal means sharing the struggles of your people, not hiding from them. William and Kate exchanged a glance, sensing that something fundamental was shifting in the conversation. What you're proposing is dangerous, the Queen continued. Not just to your privacy, but to the entire institution of the monarchy. If this fails, if people respond with cynicism instead of generosity, it could damage the royal family's reputation for generations. Yes, Your Majesty, William agreed. We understand that. But if it succeeds, she said, and for the first time, there was a hint of something that might have been approval in her voice. It could show the world that the monarchy still matters, that we still have the power to inspire people to do extraordinary things. Kate leaned forward in her chair. Your Majesty, we've been thinking about this all night. We know we can't just open our doors randomly. It would have to be planned carefully, with proper security measures, with limits on what areas people could see. But we also know that anything less than complete authenticity won't work. People can sense when they're being shown a performance instead of reality. The Queen returned to her chair, and when she sat down, she seemed to have aged several years in the span of minutes. The weight of this decision was visible on her face. If I were to approve this, she said slowly, there would be conditions. Many conditions. William felt his heart leap, but he tried to keep his expression neutral. Of course, Your Majesty. Ever you think's necessary. The children would have to be protected completely. No cameras in their rooms, no interviews. About their private lives, this would be about saving the hospital, not exploiting their suffering for entertainment. Absolutely, Kate agreed immediately. And there would have to be a clear exit strategy. If at any point this becomes harmful to the royal family or to the children you're trying to help, it stops immediately. We understand. The Queen was quiet. For another long moment, and in that silence, William and Kate could feel the future hanging in the balance. Finally, she spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. There's something behind that door that you need to see before we go any further with this conversation. That evening, William and Kate sat across from each other at their kitchen table, surrounded by papers, laptops, and cold cups of coffee. They had been planning for hours, their initial shock transformed into focused determination. Kate had pulled her hair back into a simple ponytail, and William had loosened his tie, signs that they were ready to work. If we liquidate the jewelry collection, Kate said, running her finger down a long list of numbers, we could raise about 12 million pounds. But that's still not enough. William rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. The hospital needed at least 25 million pounds to keep the pediatric wing operational for the next 5 years. It seemed like an impossible amount, even for them. What about the art collection? He suggested, though his voice lacked conviction. They both knew that selling royal artifacts would create a scandal that could overshadow their efforts entirely. Kate looked up from her calculations, her eyes meeting his. William, what if we're thinking about this all wrong? What if instead of trying to raise the money quietly, we made this public? Really public? He frowned, not understanding where she was going with this. You mean a press conference? We've done those before, and they never raise enough money for something this big. No, Kate said, leaning forward with growing excitement. I mean something completely different, something no royal has ever done before. She paused, watching his reaction carefully. What if we opened our home? What if we invited people too? See how we really live, and asked them to help save these children? William's eyes widened. The idea was so radical, so unprecedented, that for a moment he couldn't speak. Royal privacy had been sacred for centuries. The thought of strangers walking through their personal spaces, seeing their family photos, their children's toys, their private moments, it went against everything he had been taught about royal protocol. Kate, you know we can't do that, he said softly. The security concerns alone would be ... What if we could? She interrupted. What if we found a way to make it work? William, think about those children. Think about Emma asking why we stopped visiting. Think about Marcus wondering if anyone cares enough to help him fight his cancer. Her words hit him like a physical blow. She was right, and he knew it, but the implications of what she was suggesting were staggering. It would mean exposing their family to unprecedented scrutiny, risking their children's privacy, and potentially changing the monarchy forever. My grandmother would never approve, he said, though even as he spoke, he could hear the uncertainty. In his own voice, Kate reached across the table and took his hand. Your grandmother has always said that the monarchy must evolve to survive. Maybe this is how it evolves. Maybe this is how we show people that we're not just figureheads, but real people who care about real problems. They sat in silence for several minutes, both understanding the magnitude of what they were considering. Finally, William spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. Even if we did this, even if we somehow got permission, would it be enough? Would people actually care enough to donate that kind of money? Kate smiled for the first time that day, and William could see a spark of hope in her eyes. Do you remember what happened when we visited that school in Manchester last year? When we sat with those children who had lost their parents? William nodded. It had been one of the most emotionally challenging visits of their lives, but also one of the most meaningful. The donations that came in afterward, Kate continued, just from that one visit, were more than any traditional fundraising campaign had ever achieved. People connected with us because we were real with them. We let them see that we were hurting too. She was right again, and William knew it. There was something powerful about authenticity, about letting people see past the titles and the protocol to the human beings underneath. So what exactly are you proposing? He asked, though he could already feel his resistance beginning to crumble. Kate took a deep breath, organizing her thoughts. A televised tour of our home, but not like anything that's been done before. Show them our real life, the messy kitchen after breakfast, The toys scattered in the living room, the photos on our bedside tables. We tell them about the children at the hospital, and we ask them to help us save lives. And you think people would respond to that? I think people are tired of feeling disconnected from the royal family, she said firmly. I think they want to know that we're just parents who love our children and want to protect other people's children too. And I think if we're brave enough to be vulnerable, they'll be generous enough to help. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of Kensington Palace, but William couldn't feel its warmth. He stood in his private study, staring at the official letter that had arrived just an hour ago. His hands trembled slightly as he read the words again, hoping somehow they would change. Kate entered the room quietly, carrying 2 cups of tea as she always did when she sensed he was troubled. "What is it, darling?" she asked softly, setting the cups down on his desk. Her voice carried that gentle concern that had comforted him. Through so many difficult moments over the years, William looked up at his wife, his blue eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and determination. "It's about the children's hospital," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The one we've been supporting for the past 5 years. Kate moved closer, her hand finding his shoulder. She had learned to read his expressions over their years. Together, and right now, she could see he was struggling to maintain his composure. The hospital had become more than just another charity to them. It was where they had met some of the bravest children they had ever known, where they had witnessed miracles and heartbreak in equal measure. "They're closing the pediatric wing," William continued, his voice growing stronger but still heavy with emotion. "Budget cuts. They say they can't afford to keep it running anymore." Kate felt her heart sink. She thought immediately of little Emma, the 8-year-old girl with leukemia who always asked about their children whenever they visited. She remembered Marcus, the 12-year-old boy who had taught William how to play his favorite video game while receiving chemotherapy. These weren't just statistics or names in a file. These were children whose faces lit up whenever they saw the royal couple walking through the hospital corridors. "How many children will this affect?" Kate asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to hear the answer. 237, William replied immediately. The number was burned into his memory now. 237 children who need specialized care, who have nowhere else to go. Kate sank into the chair beside him, her usual composure cracking slightly. She had always been the stronger one emotionally, the one who could smile and offer comfort even in the most difficult situations. But this news hit her differently. As a mother herself, she couldn't imagine what these families were going through. "There has to be something we can do," she said, her voice filled with quiet determination. "We can't just let this happen." William nodded, already knowing what she was thinking. They had discussed it many times before, the limitations of their position, the careful balance they had to maintain between their royal duties and their personal desires to help. But this felt different. This felt like a moment when they had to choose between protocol and what was right. "I've already made some calls," William said, pulling out his phone. Spoke with the hospital director, the health minister, even reached out to some private foundations. "Everyone says the same thing, there's just not enough money." Kate stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the garden where their own children often played. She thought about how fortunate they were, how different their lives could have been. The contrast wasn't lost on her. Here they were, living in a palace, while just across the city, families were receiving devastating news about their sick children. "What about the emergency fund?" she asked, turning back to face him. "The one the Queen established for situations like this." William shook his head. "It's been depleted. The pandemic took everything, and with the economic situation." He trailed off, not needing to finish the sentence. They stood in silence for a moment, both lost in their own thoughts. Outside, they could hear the sound of their children playing in the garden, their laughter a stark reminder of the joy that other families might lose. "You have to try something," Kate said finally. "Even if it means ... She paused, knowing that what she was about to suggest would change everything. "Even if it means doing something we've never done before." The Queen stood up slowly, her movements deliberate and heavy with purpose. William and Kate followed her across the sitting room to a door they had never noticed before, hidden behind a bookshelf filled with leather-bound volumes. As she reached for the handle, She paused and turned to face them. "What I'm about to show you has been secret for 70 years, she said, her voice carrying a weight that made both William and Kate hold their breath. "But perhaps it's time for secrets to end." She opened the door to reveal a narrow staircase leading upward. The walls were lined with photographs, but as they climbed, William and Kate realized these weren't the formal royal portraits they were accustomed to seeing. These were candid shots, personal moments captured in black and white, the Queen as a young mother reading to her children. Prince Philip teaching William and Harry to fish, Diana laughing at something off camera, while holding baby William at the top of the stairs was a small room that looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. The walls were covered with children's drawings, letters written in crayon, and photographs of the Queen visiting hospitals, orphanages, and schools. But these weren't official royal visits. These were private moments captured without fanfare or media attention. "My God," Kate whispered, moving closer to examine a letter dated 1952. It was written by a young boy in a hospital, thanking the Queen for visiting him and bringing him a toy soldier. "For the first 20 years of my reign," the Queen said quietly, "I did exactly what you're proposing to do now. Every month, I would visit sick children, bring them gifts, sit with families who were struggling, but I did it in secret because my advisors said it wasn't appropriate for the Queen to be seen in such emotional situations." William was staring at a photograph that showed his grandmother, barely older than he was now, holding a small girl. With bandages covering most of her head, the tenderness in the young Queen's face was unmistakable. "Why did you stop?" he asked softly. The Queen moved to a small desk in the corner and picked up a folder. "Because of this," she said, opening. It too revealed newspaper clippings from 1972. The headlines were brutal. Queen's secret hospital visits exposed. Royal family accused of using sick children for publicity. Palace denies cover-up of private charity work. Kate read over William's shoulder, her heart sinking with each article. "The press found out. One photographer followed me to a children's ward," the Queen explained. "The pictures he took were published without permission from the families, without any context. The children's privacy was violated. Their medical conditions were discussed in tabloids, and suddenly my private acts of compassion became a public relations nightmare." She moved to another wall, pointing to a letter from a hospital administrator. "The negative publicity was so intense that several hospitals asked me to stop visiting. They said my presence was causing more harm than good, that families were being harassed by reporters, that sick children were being treated like props in a royal drama." William felt his heart sink. This was exactly what they were afraid of. The nightmare scenario that could destroy everything they were trying to accomplish. "So I stopped," the Queen continued. "I went back to formal visits, scheduled appearances, carefully controlled interactions with the public. It was safer, cleaner, more appropriate. But I never forgot those children, and I never stopped wondering. What would have happened if I had been braver? If I had found a way to continue helping them despite the criticism?" Kate was studying a drawing made by a child who clearly had limited use of his hands. At the bottom, in shaky letters, it said, "Thank you, Queen, for making me feel special." "Your Majesty," Kate said carefully, "what if we could do it differently? What if we could control the narrative from the beginning? Make sure the children's privacy is protected, ensure that the focus stays on saving the hospital rather than on our personal lives." The Queen looked at her with something that might have been pride. "That's exactly what I hoped you would say." She moved to the desk and pulled out a thick folder. "For the past 40 years, I've been planning how to do this properly, how to use the power of the monarchy to help people without exploiting them, how to be authentic without being irresponsible, how to open our doors without losing our dignity." William's eyes widened as he realized what she was saying. "You've been planning this?" "Not this exact situation," the Queen admitted, "but something like it. I've always known that eventually the royal family would need to take this risk. I just never knew when the right moment would come, or who would be brave enough to take the first step." She handed the folder to Kate. "Inside here is everything you'll need: security protocols, media guidelines, legal frameworks, even suggested formats for the broadcast. I've spent decades learning from my mistakes, making sure that when this moment came, we would be ready." Kate opened the folder with trembling hands, scanning pages of detailed plans that represented decades of careful thought and preparation. "You've been waiting for us to ask for this," William said, understanding, finally dawning on him. The Queen smiled, and for a moment, she looked like the young woman in the photographs on the wall. "I've been waiting for someone to be brave enough to do what I should have done 50 years ago, to choose helping people over protecting ourselves. Trust that the public will respond to authenticity rather than performance." She moved to the window and looked out at the gardens below. The world has changed since 1972. Social media, instant communication, the ability to speak directly to people without going through traditional media. These are tools I never had. Tools that could make this work. William and Kate stood together, holding the folder that represented the Queen's lifelong dream of returning the monarchy to its true purpose. But the Queen said, turning back to face them, "There's still one more thing you need to see before you make your final decision." The Queen led them to another door at the far end of the secret room, this one leading to a balcony that overlooked the hospital they were fighting to save. From this vantage point, they could see the entire complex, the main building where emergency cases arrived day and night. The research facilities where doctors worked tirelessly to find new treatments, and the pediatric wing that would soon close forever. "I had this balcony built in 1985, the Queen said softly, "after I realized I could no longer visit the children directly. I wanted to be able to see the place where I wished I could still make a difference." As they watched, an ambulance pulled up to the emergency entrance. Even from this distance, they could see the urgency in the movements of the medical staff as they rushed to help whoever was inside. "Every day for the past 38 years, the Queen continued, I've come up here and looked at that hospital. I've wondered about the children inside, the families waiting for good news, the doctors fighting battles that most of us never see. And every day I've regretted my decision to stop helping them directly." Kate felt tears beginning to form in her eyes as she watched a second ambulance arrive. "How many children do you think we could save if this works?" "Not just the 237 who need the pediatric wing," the Queen replied. "If this succeeds, if we can show people that the royal family is willing to sacrifice privacy for purpose, it could change everything. Hospitals across the country could receive funding, research programs could be expanded, families could get the help they need." William was gripping the balcony railing so tightly his knuckles were white. "And if it fails, then we'll have tried," the Queen said. "Simply, and sometimes trying is enough to inspire others to keep fighting." A small figure appeared in one of the hospital windows, a child in a wheelchair, waving at someone inside the room. Kate thought immediately of Emma, of Marcus, of Sophie, who drew pictures of their family to give herself hope. "Your Majesty," William said, his voice filled with quiet determination, "we want to do this, not for the publicity, not for our legacy, but for those children. We want to show the world that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is admit you need help." Queen nodded slowly. "Then we'll begin tomorrow. The broadcast will happen in 1 week, giving us time to prepare properly, and giving the hospital time to set up systems for handling the donations that will hopefully follow." Kate turned to face her, still hardly believing this was really happening. "What should we tell people? How do we explain why we're doing something so unprecedented?" "We tell them the truth," the Queen replied. "We tell them that being royal doesn't mean being perfect or distant or untouchable. We tell them that it means using whatever platform you have to help people who need it most. We tell them that love for others sometimes requires sacrificing love for yourself." As they prepared to leave the secret room, the Queen stopped and picked up one more item from the desk, a small wooden box that looked very old. "This contains the first letter I ever received from a sick child," she said, handing it to Kate. "I want you to have it, to remind you why we're taking this risk." Kate opened the box carefully and found a letter written in faded ink on yellow paper. It was dated 1953, and written by a 7-year-old boy named Timothy, who was dying of polio. The letter was simple. Dear Queen, my mummy says you care about children like me. I wanted to say thank you for caring, even if you never meet me. Love, Timothy. Did you ever meet him? Kate asked softly. Yes, the Queen replied. He was one of the first children I visited in secret. He died 3 weeks later, but his mother told me that my visit was the last time she saw him truly smile. That's when I knew this work was worth any risk. Walking back through the palace corridors, the three of them were quiet, each lost in their own thoughts about what the next week would bring. When they reached the main sitting room, the Queen turned to face William and Kate one final time. In 7 days, she said, you'll invite the world into your home and ask them to help save children they've never met. Some people will respond with generosity. Others will criticize you for breaking tradition, for being too emotional, for asking too much. But remember this, every child who receives treatment because of what you're about to do will carry a piece of your courage with them for the rest of their lives. Yes. William and Kate drove home to Kensington Palace. They passed the hospital. Again. This time, instead of feeling helpless, they felt hope. In 1 week, they would stand before television cameras and show the world who they really were, not distant royals living in privilege, but parents who understood that loving your own children means protecting all children. Kate reached over and took William's hand as they pulled through the palace gates. Are you ready for this? William looked at their home, thinking about their own children playing safely inside, then looked back toward the hospital where other children were fighting for their lives. I'm ready, he said. Let's save some lives. 1 week later, as cameras rolled and the world watched, William and Kate opened their door and changed the monarchy forever. Behind that door was not just their private life, but their humanity. And sometimes, humanity is the most powerful force of all.